One of the many troubling characteristics of our current political climate is how lines of division have become gaping caverns. In Kenosha today, if you have certain kinds of slogans decorated your boarded up building, some people will refuse to shop there. Last week, I admit that I even found myself stating that I wouldn't go into a certain downtown business because the owner and her store are featured in a campaign ad using what happened in Kenosha as criticism of a candidate that I support. Surely we have every right to take our business elsewhere as consumers, but I wonder how many of us would have done this a few years ago or even a few months ago. How can we return to acting with fundamental decency in a world with so much rancor and division? Comporting ourselves with decency is a key theme of Yom Kippur. This afternoon's Torah portion, the Holiness Code from Leviticus, is a detailed list of acts of decency toward others, summarized in Leviticus 19:18, Ve'ahabta l're'acha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. But the basic decency of love your neighbor, especially in response to those with whom we disagree, seems elusive today. Dutch philosopher Rutger Bregman takes the position that the reason we humans have fallen so far from acting with decency is that we are constantly given the message that humanity is not capable of better. Bregman seeks to prove the opposite, that if we expect people to behave well and show that behavior in ourselves, then good-heartedness will manifest itself in the world. After the Kenosha devastation, this positive view may seem naive. Those nights of destruction and violence might be used as proof for the verse in Genesis that precedes the flood. The verse says that God had to destroy all life on earth because every intent of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually. In this dark worldview, promoted by some today for political gain, human evil and anarchy are always just below the surface, waiting to emerge. However, the primary Jewish belief about human evil is not based on this verse from the flood story. Derived instead from a verse in the creation story, the sages taught that human beings are endowed at birth with both a Yetzer HaTov, a good inclination, and a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. The verse says, Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adam. And the eternal God formed the human being. Because there are two yuds in the verb vayitzer, formed, the rabbis concluded that human beings were created with two yetzers that start with yud. Therefore, we humans are not only evil, as in the flood story, but endowed from birth with both good and evil. To make the same point as the rabbis, the Dutch philosopher takes issue with a 1951 classic of English literature, Lord of the Flies. You remember the story. A group of British schoolboys are stranded together on an island. They form a society that quickly devolves into cruelty and lawlessness, even murder. In pitching the book to his publisher, author William Golding wrote, "Even if we start with a clean slate, our nature compels us to make a muck of it." Echoing the flood story verse, Golding asserted, "Man produces evil as bees produce honey." this story did not ring true to Bregman. And so he sought out and found a true story of boys who were stranded on an island. This real-life Lord of the Flies story took place in the South Pacific in the 1960s. And it was loyalty and cooperation, friendship and shared responsibility that governed 6 stranded schoolboys' behavior for 15 months before they were rescued. But we never hear this story. Instead, Lord of the Flies is held out as a predictor of human behavior. And all of those TV survivor shows echo that fictional story, reinforcing that lying, cheating, and backbiting will always dominate. No wonder we're conditioned to think the worst and even begin to fulfill that prophecy ourselves. But Jewish teaching allows us to let go of the idea that bad actors are inherently evil. That is not to say that those who cause such terrible destruction in Kenosha are to be excused. On the contrary, the rabbis would see those involved as having acted on their worst impulses. And they would also view the Kenosha County supervisor, who recently sat with her back turned for 2 hours to angry members of the community, they would view her the same way, as having let her Yetzer Hara get the best of her. Now, perhaps this supervisor should not be in public office if she cannot face critics, but she is not an inherently evil person. These folks are not completely irredeemable, and neither are we. If we believe that there is a positive and decent instinct in humanity, we will be able to see it manifest even in the Kenosha drama. Look at the people who have been volunteering after the violence to clean up and paint positive messages on buildings. Witness the grassroots community leaders whose response to the crisis has been to feed the hungry, register voters, offer COVID tests, give away games and school supplies to needy kids, and more. Our Mishkan HaNefesh Machzor has added something strikingly fresh in a number of places in the Yom Kippur liturgy. Readings that emphasize not only Chet Shechatanu, the sin we have sinned, but also Hakarat HaTov, recognizing the good. In fact, the entire Ne'ilah service, the closing service of today, is centered around the theme, you hold out your hand, assuring us that God is looking for the good in us and welcoming us as the gates of repentance begin to close.